The cameras were flashing before anyone even stepped onto the red carpet. And yet, in all the chaos, one question hung in the air, electrifying every journalist, photographer, and bystander. What happens when two worlds collide? Hollywood royalty and British royalty, and one side refuses to play along. This wasn't just another gala. This wasn't just another red carpet. This was the 63rd New York Film Festival at Lincoln Center, and it was about to become a stage for a clash the world would never forget. George Clooney and Amal Clooney arrived in perfect synchronicity, a vision of elegance and power that seemed to bend the very air around them. Cameras zoomed in on Amal's poised stride, on George's effortless charm, and the way the world seemed to lean in as they approached. And somewhere, across the velvet ropes, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle watched. They had prepared, rehearsed, imagined this moment. Surely, they thought, their presence would be noticed, appreciated, maybe even admired. They couldn't have been more wrong. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine the scene. Hundreds of cameras, flashing lights, reporters shouting names, the smell of expensive perfumes mingling with the crisp fall air. And in the middle of it all, George and Amal Clooney glided forward, the very definition of control, charisma, and unshakable composure. Prince Harry, in his tailored suit, and Meghan, radiant and stylish, attempted to navigate the crowd, their eyes flicking nervously between the cameras and the celebrities who dominated this world. A moment of tension had already set in, a subtle collision of expectation and reality. What made this moment shocking wasn't just the presence of two power couples from entirely different spheres. It was the unspoken hierarchy, the silent judgment, the way George Clooney's every move, every glance, every smile, seemed to carry an invisible message. We are untouchable, and this is our domain. Harry and Meghan, despite all their royal authority, suddenly felt the weight of Hollywood dominance. The audience might not have known it yet, but the drama had begun, and it would only escalate from here. There is something about the red carpet that magnifies every insecurity, every gesture, every micro-expression. It is a stage where perception becomes reality. And here, under the unforgiving glare of international media, the stakes were incredibly high. Harry and Meghan, who had navigated royal protocols and media scrutiny for years, found themselves in unfamiliar territory. Hollywood isn't just glamorous, it's ruthless in subtler, more performative ways. Amal Clooney, known for her poise and strategic brilliance, and George Clooney, the consummate actor and media tactician, understood this intuitively. Harry and Meghan, in their very human way, were learning it the hard way. But the story doesn't begin with tension alone. It begins with expectation, hope, and a miscalculation. Harry and Meghan approached the red carpet thinking this would be a meeting of equals, maybe even an opportunity to connect, to be welcomed into a world they had long observed from a distance. The Clooneys, however, were in complete control. The cameras captured it all, the first glance, the tentative smile, the fleeting handshake, and in each frame, the power dynamic was unmistakable. And yet, even as this drama unfolded, there were whispers, subtle signs that hinted at something deeper. A nod here, a raised eyebrow there, a gesture of polite dismissal that spoke louder than words ever could. It was as if George Clooney, with one look, had delivered a message to Harry and Meghan: stay in your lane. The audacity, the elegance, the quiet authority, it was all being recorded, scrutinized, and analyzed in real time. Social media was already stirring, and the world hadn't even processed the first public exchange. The audience might wonder, why does this matter? After all, it's just a red carpet. But here lies the intrigue. It's not just about appearances. It's about influence, reputation, and the intricate dance of power that plays out in public spaces where millions are watching. In that moment, cameras didn't just capture images. They captured a narrative, a story of dominance, expectation, and unspoken judgment. And the first hints of embarrassment, of tension, of public humiliation were already beginning to surface. Then came the subtle misstep. A smile offered too quickly, a gesture too eager, a step that didn't quite land where it should. In the world of Hollywood red carpets, such small errors can become defining moments, viral clips, and endless commentary fodder. For Harry and Meghan, who were accustomed to controlling narratives through statements and interviews, the lack of control here was palpable. It was an unfamiliar, almost shocking vulnerability, and the cameras were merciless. Amal Clooney, with her innate awareness, noticed it. George Clooney, ever the strategist, sensed it. Together, they projected a calm, effortless authority that contrasted starkly with Harry and Meghan's anxious movements. The crowd sensed it too, a magnetic tension that no amount of flashes or fanfare could dilute. Reporters leaned in, microphones poised, knowing instinctively that something monumental was unfolding. The energy was palpable, almost electric, and everyone could feel that this night would be remembered. But even as all this drama was playing out on the surface, another layer was developing behind the scenes. What was whispered between the Clooneys, what subtle instructions were passed, what glances exchanged, all of it hinted at the careful orchestration of presence and power. Harry and Meghan, despite their years of public life, were encountering a different kind of social acumen, one rooted not in titles or tradition, but in charisma, confidence, and the subtle art of command. The imbalance was stark, and the first public signs of discomfort on the royal couple's faces were undeniable. By now, social media watchers had begun to notice. Clips and snapshots circulated almost instantly. George Clooney adjusting his cuff, Amal's controlled smile, Harry's tentative approach, Meghan's carefully measured wave. The online commentary ranged from awe to speculation, dissecting every nuance, every potential slight, every unspoken message. And in this digital echo chamber, the narrative began to solidify. George Clooney had, in mere minutes, asserted dominance without uttering a harsh word, leaving Harry and Meghan navigating unfamiliar waters. The audience knows something is brewing, something public, something humiliating yet riveting, but they do not yet know the moment that would make headlines, the moment that would be replayed, debated, and dissected across the world. The stage is set, the actors are in position, and the world is about to witness an interaction that promises to be unforgettable. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The red carpet stretched out like a stage set for the world's most watched drama. But this wasn't just about gowns, suits, or flashing cameras. This was about power, presence, who owned the moment. And the question echoing in every mind there was simple. Who would dominate this encounter? Hollywood royalty or British royalty? George and Amal Clooney arrived first, and the effect was immediate. Cameras pivoted, flashes exploded, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Amal glided forward, her gown flowing like liquid elegance, her posture perfect, her expression calm yet unyielding. George followed, exuding the kind of confidence that only years of charm, fame, and careful media mastery could cultivate. Together, they were magnetic, and the world felt it. Every head turned, every lens focused, every eye watched as if expecting a spectacle. And there, slightly behind the velvet ropes, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle approached. Dressed immaculately, they moved with a rehearsed grace that suggested awareness of the cameras and the expectations of the public. But their energy was different. Nervous, tentative, expectant. They had stepped into this world before, yes, but never quite like this. Never in direct proximity to figures whose very aura seemed to bend the spotlight around them. The air was thick with tension, like two storms poised on a collision course. Imagine for a moment being Harry and Meghan. You've navigated the scrutinizing gaze of millions before. You've survived tabloids, interviews, and royal protocol. You understand public perception better than most. Yet suddenly, you are here, in a foreign terrain, and the rules have changed. The Clooneys are not bound by etiquette, tradition, or expectation. They move freely, effortlessly, commanding attention without demanding it. And you realize, in that instant, that the game has shifted and you are behind. The cameras didn't just capture images that night. They captured the subtle storylines of power, control, and social dominance. George adjusted his cuff with an almost imperceptible smirk. Amal glanced toward the crowd, her smile polite but firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. And Harry and Meghan? Their smiles were practiced, slightly stiff, a little too wide. Their attempts at casual greetings seemed small against the Clooneys' monumental presence. It was a mismatch, a subtle, unspoken clash of worlds, and the world watching could feel it immediately. The red carpet is a unique arena. Every movement is amplified, every gesture scrutinized, every pause interpreted. For Harry and Meghan, even their confident stride betrayed the smallest hints of hesitation. Amal's eyes met Meghan's for a brief second, polite, controlled, and calculating. And in that split second, Meghan knew something was off. She was in unfamiliar territory. She had underestimated the Clooneys' influence and their ability to project dominance without speaking a word. George Clooney, on the other hand, seemed almost untouchable. There was a subtle choreography in his movements, a mastery of timing and presence. Every step, every glance, every tiny gesture was perfectly placed to maintain his status as the center of attention. The crowd responded instinctively, leaning in as if drawn by some invisible force. And the irony was undeniable. Harry and Meghan, whose lives were shaped by royal protocol and centuries of tradition, were now learning that influence in Hollywood came with a different set of rules and a much sharper edge. Yet the moment was only beginning. As the Clooneys approached photographers and waved for selfies, Harry and Meghan moved closer, attempting to intersect the flow of attention, hoping perhaps for acknowledgement, maybe even an invitation into the moment. But Amal's poise remained unshaken. George's subtle smile, calm and controlled, seemed to say, "You may step forward, but you will not overshadow." The Clooneys were not confrontational, but their aura alone communicated everything. Stay back. The crowd sensed it. Flashbulbs intensified. Reporters whispered to each other, exchanging theories about what was unfolding. Some speculated on the potential awkwardness, others on the unspoken tension, and a few, the most attuned, understood that a spectacle was about to emerge. And then, in a small yet revealing moment, it happened. Meghan tried to step into conversation, a tentative opening line aimed to connect, to bridge the gap. But George, without a pause, acknowledged her with a brief nod, polite but firm. No engagement, no invitation, a complete refusal to participate beyond minimal courtesy. Imagine the internal chaos for Harry and Meghan at that instant. All the preparation, all the rehearsals, all the strategic posturing, undone by a single gesture. A polite nod, a small smile, a refusal to fully acknowledge them. And the crowd, cameras, and social media users captured every millisecond of it. The subtlety of the interaction only heightened its impact, turning a seemingly trivial gesture into a viral narrative. The tension escalated further when the Clooneys paused briefly for a photo op. Amal positioned herself just slightly ahead of George, subtly creating a visual barrier. Harry and Meghan attempted to interject, but the positioning, the timing, the choreography, all of it, left them awkwardly sidelined. Even the most casual observers could sense the subtle humiliation, the micro moments of discomfort that often define high-stakes social interactions. This wasn't aggressive or loud. It was precise, deliberate, and devastating in its subtlety. And yet, Harry and Meghan persisted. They tried a few more polite gestures, small smiles, an attempted wave, attempts to regain footing. But each move was met with perfect control by the Clooneys. Nothing was wasted, nothing uncalculated. Every step they took was designed to maintain dominance without ever appearing domineering. The red carpet became a stage not for confrontation, but for demonstration of social hierarchy, and the Clooneys were the undisputed rulers. The irony was brutal. Harry and Meghan, who had navigated the treacherous waters of media scrutiny for years, were now exposed in a new light. Their tactics, previously effective in royal contexts, faltered in the realm of Hollywood spectacle. Every small error, every awkward gesture, every miscalculated attempt to connect was magnified by the press, captured in high definition, and broadcast to a global audience. The world was watching, and the lesson was clear. Influence is context-dependent, and presence, effortless, unshakable presence, can be more powerful than title or lineage. Even as they tried to recalibrate, even as they attempted to reclaim their composure, the Clooneys moved through the crowd with an elegance that left no room for intrusion. George's charisma, Amal's poise, the unspoken synchronization of their partnership, it all communicated one message. This is our space. You may exist in it, but you will not dominate it. Harry and Meghan's presence was acknowledged, yes, but only on the terms set by the Clooneys. Every observer, every lens, every social media feed recorded the subtle, devastating reality. The power dynamics were unmistakable. By now, whispers began to spread among reporters and attendees alike. "Did you see that glance?" someone murmured. "Absolutely brilliant timing," another said. "Harry and Meghan seemed completely thrown off," a third observed. The world hadn't yet realized the full extent of what was happening, but those on the red carpet knew something extraordinary was unfolding. And with every click of the shutter, every camera angle, every fleeting gesture, the narrative became more explosive. And as if on cue, a faint murmur among onlookers began to grow. Could Harry and Meghan salvage the moment? Could they find a way to insert themselves into the flow of attention? Could they recover from the subtle, yet unmistakable, public rebuff? The tension was unbearable. The stakes were impossibly high, and the answer was still out of reach. And just when it seemed the Clooneys might simply glide past without any further interaction, a new variable entered the scene. A fleeting shadow, a whispered suggestion, a subtle maneuver, something that promised to change the dynamic entirely. The crowd held its breath, cameras poised, social media fingers ready to erupt. Harry and Meghan had one more chance to engage, to recover, to assert themselves, and the world waited to see if they would rise or falter. But what happened next would push the tension to its breaking point, and no one could have predicted the next moment on this now infamous red carpet. What happens when worlds collide, and one side refuses to acknowledge the other? That question hung in the air like a storm cloud as the red carpet stretched onward, each step more calculated than the last. The cameras were relentless, the crowd buzzing with anticipation, and Harry and Meghan could feel it. This was their chance to intersect with George and Amal Clooney. But could they navigate this moment without faltering, or would Hollywood's finest leave them in the shadows? The first real encounter was deceptively simple. A handshake, a nod, a glance. Yet, in its simplicity lay the full weight of power dynamics. George Clooney extended a hand. Confident, steady, a man entirely in control of his world. Harry stepped forward, matching the gesture, smiling with that familiar mix of charm and nervous energy. Meghan followed, poised and deliberate, hoping to mirror Amal's elegance. But there was a subtle, almost imperceptible imbalance. In that handshake, in that moment, George held more than just a hand. He held authority, influence, presence. And Harry and Meghan, despite their royal status, felt the shift immediately. Imagine standing there, poised for connection, only to realize the other person has already claimed the narrative. Every micro-expression counted. George's slight smile was perfectly measured, neither dismissive nor overly welcoming. Amal's eyes met Meghan's briefly, polite yet unreadable, signaling that this encounter was entirely on their terms. The Clooneys didn't need to speak to communicate dominance. Their presence alone said it all. Harry and Meghan, trained for public scrutiny and mastery of royal protocol, found themselves in uncharted territory. Their every calculated move suddenly seemed small, almost awkward. The world, of course, was watching. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the subtle hesitations, the slight misalignments, the tiny moments of tension. Reporters murmured, "Did you see that?" Perfect control. Social media users were already dissecting every frame, analyzing body language, interpreting micro-expressions, and speculating on the dynamics of this high-profile encounter. Every detail mattered: the tilt of a head, the positioning of a shoulder, the briefest pause in speech. Harry tried to initiate conversation, leaning slightly forward, attempting to bridge the gap with casual, well-practiced phrases. "It's great to see you both here," he said, his tone warm but slightly hesitant, aware of the flashing cameras. Amal's response was subtle, a small nod, a faint smile, and a calm, measured acknowledgement that stopped short of full engagement. George, meanwhile, maintained a steady gaze, polite yet assertive, demonstrating that he would not be drawn into overt conversation unless he chose. Meghan attempted to fill the gap, offering compliments, acknowledging Amal's advocacy work, and trying to establish common ground. But the Clooneys' synchronized poise created a subtle barrier, unspoken yet undeniable. Every compliment, every effort to connect, was met with grace, yes, but also with firm boundaries. The Clooneys were masters of presence. Harry and Meghan were learning that influence here wasn't earned through titles or past prominence. It was conveyed in the unshakable confidence of the moment. And then, a small but telling shift occurred. George's eyes flicked momentarily to the cameras, adjusting his posture with ease, subtly signaling to Amal that the encounter was under control. Amal, in response, moved slightly ahead, creating a subtle visual separation that emphasized the Clooneys' dominance in this interaction. Harry's smile faltered for a split second. Meghan's hand, which had been extended for a subtle touch on George's arm, paused mid-motion, unsure whether it would be welcomed or dismissed. The emotional spike in this moment was palpable. Harry and Meghan, accustomed to commanding attention through royal authority and media manipulation, suddenly felt a vulnerability they rarely experienced. The sensation was jarring, almost surreal, to be physically present yet socially sidelined. The world was watching, and the cameras captured every microsecond of hesitation, uncertainty, and subtle tension. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A royal couple, trained in diplomacy and public perception, being carefully, politely outmaneuvered on a red carpet by a Hollywood power couple. Audience question: what would you do in this situation? You've trained for years in public diplomacy, but now you're confronted with someone whose confidence and presence dominate the room without a single aggressive move. Would you step back, push forward, or try to reclaim control? The first encounter escalated subtly as the Clooneys continued along the carpet. George, sensing the attempt at engagement, tilted his head slightly, offering a polite but unambiguous acknowledgement, a micro-gesture that communicated both recognition and non-engagement. Amal's eyes maintained their calm, measured assessment of Meghan, conveying that while politeness was extended, any attempt to insert herself into their space needed approval. Every observer, every lens, every pair of eyes captured the tension, knowing that this silent power play was as riveting as any spoken confrontation. And yet, Harry and Meghan tried again. They moved slightly closer, attempting to reinsert themselves into the flow of the moment. Perhaps they imagined a friendly word, a laugh, a shared anecdote, a human connection that could defuse the subtle dominance projected by the Clooneys. But each attempt was met with grace, precision, and the unspoken authority of those who knew exactly how to command presence. The result? The royal couple's gestures, however confident in intention, seemed muted in effect. Here's a twist. The crowd itself sensed it. Flashbulbs popped not merely at the Clooneys, but at the tiny fractures in the encounter. Observers whispered, "Did you see that hesitation? Notice how George and Amal positioned themselves?" That was a masterclass in silent control. Even without aggressive action, the Clooneys had communicated everything needed. This interaction would proceed on their terms. Harry and Meghan were, for a moment, sidelined. The situation grew more dramatic when Harry attempted a softer approach, a compliment aimed at Amal's humanitarian work. This could have been a bridge, a subtle acknowledgement meant to equalize. But Amal's response was calculated, polite, and noncommittal. Her composure was flawless, her poise unshaken, her presence commanding. George's small smile, measured, confident, underscored the message: the stage was theirs. Any attempt to insert oneself must be deliberate and, above all, subtle. Contradictions were everywhere. Harry and Meghan, whose lives revolve around public scrutiny and careful media management, found themselves at a disadvantage in a realm they thought they understood. The lesson was clear: influence is not universal. Power in one domain does not automatically translate to power in another. Presence, confidence, and timing, subtle, almost invisible, can outweigh titles, prestige, or prior fame. And just as the first encounter seemed to reach a subtle climax, another micro-moment occurred that would set the stage for further tension. A photographer stepped forward, asking for a group shot. George, in full command, adjusted slightly, guiding Amal into the perfect position. Harry and Meghan moved to join, but the Clooneys' positioning left them slightly to the side, visible, but clearly secondary. The crowd sensed the hierarchy immediately. Every flash captured a subtle narrative: leaders of the red carpet, and those trying to navigate it. Just as the cameras captured the perfect alignment, a whispered word, a subtle gesture, a small shift in Amal's posture suggested that something unexpected was about to happen. a move that would either cement the Clooneys' dominance or, in a shocking twist, create a public opportunity for Harry and Meghan to reclaim some presence. The tension was unbearable. The flashbulbs flashed. The crowd held its collective breath. The first encounter had set the stage, but the next moment promised to define the evening. What do you do when you realize you've been politely sidelined in front of the world? When every move you've rehearsed, every smile, every gesture has been met with calm, unshakable authority that makes you feel small, exposed, even vulnerable. For Harry and Meghan, that moment had arrived. The flashbulbs still popped, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and the whispers of reporters hinted that something was brewing, something that might break the carefully controlled rhythm of the red carpet. And so came the plea. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic in the sense of yelling or confrontation. It was subtle, almost desperate, but loaded with intention. Harry leaned slightly forward, his voice lowered just enough so only Amal and George could hear. Meghan, matching his movement, added a gesture, a soft touch on George's arm that was meant to signal friendliness, engagement, a desire to connect. The plea was simple in words, but monumental in meaning. Please, let us be a part of this moment. For an audience watching, this was fascinating, not because of the words themselves, but because of what they revealed. Harry and Meghan, accustomed to commanding attention and shaping narratives, had come up against a wall of poise, strategy, and silent authority. This was uncharted territory. They were used to being the center of scrutiny, yet here, their presence was secondary, almost peripheral. The plea was their attempt to regain control, to assert relevance, to demand acknowledgement, without being overtly aggressive. Imagine the mix of emotions in that split second. Anxiety, hope, anticipation, fear of embarrassment. Meghan's eyes scanned Amal's face for any sign of approval, while George's slight, controlled smile communicated both acknowledgement and firm boundaries. The power dynamic was unmistakable. The Clooneys had already established dominance, but Harry and Meghan were testing its limits. The audience could sense it, too, because tension is contagious. Every camera lens captured the subtle imbalance. Every social media watcher dissected it frame by frame, and the murmurs of reporters suggested that this moment would be talked about for days, maybe weeks. The plea wasn't just a physical gesture. It was layered, a soft tone in the voice, a hesitant smile, a deliberate step closer. And yet, in the art of red carpet diplomacy, subtlety is a weapon. George's response, measured and deliberate, carried a weight far greater than words. A polite nod, a brief acknowledgement, and that was it. The message was clear, boundaries had been set. You may request, you may gesture, you may plead, but inclusion is on our terms. Harry and Meghan persisted. They tried again, this time with verbal engagement, complimenting Amal on her humanitarian efforts and subtly acknowledging George's film work. The intention was clear: create common ground, establish rapport, gain entry into the narrative. Yet the Clooneys' response remained controlled, deliberate, and unyielding. Amal's eyes, calm and steady, held Meghan's gaze just long enough to signal that while acknowledgement was given, full engagement would require more than polite gestures. George's slight tilt of the head, a masterclass in subtle power, reinforced the message: the stage belongs to us. Now, here's a twist. The crowd, sensing this subtle struggle, began to lean in emotionally. Some were rooting for the Clooneys, seeing their dominance as deserved elegance and mastery. Others sympathized with Harry and Meghan, recognizing the discomfort, the vulnerability, and the human desire to be noticed, acknowledged, and included. Social media exploded almost instantly. Short clips of the plea went viral. Captions dissected gestures, body language experts commented, and online chatter amplified every nuance. The world had begun judging not just what was said, but how it was expressed, and the result was clear. The Clooneys were winning the psychological battle without aggression, while Harry and Meghan were visibly grappling with their own approach. It's important to note the emotional undertones here. This wasn't mere embarrassment. It was an unmasking of vulnerability. For Harry and Meghan, who had constructed narratives around confidence, influence, and visibility, being gently rebuffed on a public stage was a shock to the system. Every gesture that failed to gain traction amplified the tension, Every polite dismissal from the Clooneys reinforced the hierarchy, and every camera flash immortalized it. The red carpet, always a place for performance, had become a crucible of social power, and Harry and Meghan were in the hot seat. Meghan's expression shifted subtly, eyes widened just enough to betray surprise. A breath was held. A nervous smile flickered. The audience, watching closely, could sense the internal calculation. Should she push harder, pull back, or wait? Her hand hovered in midair for a fraction of a second before retreating, a subtle admission that the Clooneys were not to be trifled with. Harry, sensing the hesitation, attempted a small, wry smile, a silent attempt to regain confidence and project composure. But the dynamic had been established. The plea was not enough. This moment also demonstrated an irony that couldn't be overlooked. A royal couple, trained in diplomacy, protocol, and public relations, found themselves outmaneuvered by a celebrity couple whose power came not from title, but from charisma, strategy, and understanding of public perception. Influence, it seemed, is contextual. Commanding presence in one domain does not automatically translate to another. The audience could feel it, the cameras captured it, and social media dissected it. Then came the micro moment that would make this scene unforgettable. George, maintaining his calm authority, leaned slightly forward, offering a single word, polite, yet pointed, measured with precision. The audience caught it immediately. It wasn't dismissive, nor was it inviting. It was a boundary, a statement without aggression, a masterstroke of social command. Amal's eyes mirrored the same intent, reinforcing the signal. Inclusion is conditional, recognition is limited, and control remains theirs. Audience question: what would you have done if you were in Harry or Meghan's shoes? Would you retreat, persist, or attempt to assert yourself in a different way? Could you maintain composure while navigating subtle rebuffs in front of millions watching? These are not hypothetical questions for the couple. They were a very real, very human challenge. The plea had now reached its peak tension. Flashbulbs captured every subtle shift. Harry's brow furrowed slightly. Meghan's posture hinted at reconsideration, and the Clooneys maintained unshakable composure. The narrative was clear to anyone watching. Power isn't in asking politely. It's in controlling presence, dictating the flow, and letting the world read your authority. And yet, just when it seemed that the plea might fail entirely, a brief, almost imperceptible change occurred. A nod from George, subtle but deliberate, suggested minimal acknowledgement, a small crack in the otherwise unyielding facade. It wasn't full engagement, it was an invitation, but it was enough to reignite hope. Meghan's eyes flickered with relief, Harry straightened slightly, and the world sensed that the social tension had shifted, just slightly, but enough to make everyone hold their breath. But before the royal couple could act on this perceived opening, Amal's subtle posture shift reasserted control. The small space they might have entered was immediately redefined. George's quiet authority, combined with Amal's precise movement, communicated without words. The flow is ours, and you are guests in this space. The audience could almost feel the mental recalibration happening for Harry and Meghan, a sudden, undeniable understanding that their plea, however earnest, had not yet succeeded. And then it happened. A small, whispered comment from George, delivered with perfect timing, so that only the red carpet's inner circle might catch it. It was polite, composed, yet undeniably firm. The cameras, fortunately for the world, missed it. But the crowd sensed it, the journalists heard it, and the subtle psychological impact rippled through Harry and Meghan instantly. Their attempts to insert themselves into the interaction were not just paused, they were recalibrated entirely. The audience, social media, and journalists were collectively on edge. Could Harry and Meghan find a way to regain footing? Could they navigate the delicate balance of acknowledgement without overstepping? Could the royal couple turn this moment of subtle rejection into an opportunity? Or was the red carpet now entirely under Clooney control? The tension was electric, and the stakes could not have been higher. And just as the crowd began to lean in, anticipating the next move, a small gesture from Meghan hinted at desperation. A hand slightly extended, a tilt of the head, a fleeting expression of vulnerability. All eyes, lenses, and social media feeds were poised. The moment teetered on a knife's edge. But what George and Amal did next would make headlines and leave Harry and Meghan speechless. and the world would not soon forget it. What makes someone command a room without raising their voice? How can a glance, a posture, or a subtle smile create more impact than words ever could? That is the power of Amal Clooney. And as the cameras tracked the red carpet, it became painfully clear to Harry and Meghan that they were witnessing a masterclass in presence, composure, and unshakable control. Amal stepped forward, her stride precise, fluid, and impossibly elegant. Every movement had purpose. Every gesture, no matter how small, was calculated to convey poise and authority. She was the calm in the storm of flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and social media frenzy. The moment she entered the frame, the energy shifted. A hush seemed to descend, not because the crowd stopped talking, but because the attention, unavoidably, irresistibly, focused on her. Even George, confident and charismatic as he was, seemed to defer slightly to her presence. Harry and Meghan, already tense from their prior attempts at engagement, couldn't ignore it. They tried to match the energy, to mirror the elegance, to insert themselves into the flow of attention. But Amal's control was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. She didn't have to confront, she didn't have to dismiss, and she certainly didn't have to raise her voice. The mere act of moving with precision, holding her gaze, and maintaining a calm, yet commanding aura was enough to make the royal couple feel out of step. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. You've studied red carpets, rehearsed for international appearances, and faced relentless scrutiny. You know how to smile, how to pose, how to project. Yet here, in front of the world and millions online, your every move feels like it's being countered, your attempts at connection subtly blocked by someone who seems almost untouchable. Amal's poise wasn't arrogance, it was mastery. And it was a lesson in public perception that Harry and Meghan hadn't anticipated. The first micro-moment that caught everyone's attention was a glance. Amal's eyes flicked toward Meghan for a fraction of a second, polite, controlled, unreadable. But in that split second, the message was crystal clear, acknowledgement without invitation. Meghan's reaction was instantaneous, a slight tilt of the head, a flash of surprise, a fleeting attempt to smile confidently. But the audience, trained to read these subtle cues, noticed it immediately. Social media began to light up with speculation. Did you see Amal's glance? Totally icy. Meghan's expression says it all. The Clooneys are untouchable. Harry tried again, leaning slightly toward George, attempting to initiate a casual comment. But Amal's presence, just a subtle step forward, recalibrated the dynamic. George's brief pause and calm smile reinforced the invisible hierarchy. The Clooneys lead, the royals follow, if at all. Every gesture, every slight movement, every flicker of expression communicated control. Harry and Meghan, despite their experience in diplomacy, felt themselves being subtly edged out, outmaneuvered not with aggression, but with sheer mastery of composure. Humor, irony, and contradiction all played into the moment. Harry, who often relied on charm, humor, and relatability to defuse tension, found his usual tools muted. Meghan, whose charisma and presence had carried her through countless public events, faced a mirror she hadn't anticipated. Amal's cool efficiency highlighted every small misstep, every hesitation, and every unpracticed motion. The irony was not lost. Two public figures known for commanding attention were now struggling in the presence of someone whose power was quiet, precise, and unassailable. And yet, the brilliance of Amal's charm was not just in control, it was in subtlety. She smiled, but not too widely. She nodded, but not too much. Her eyes conveyed attention without yielding space. Her posture invited observation without encouraging intrusion. Every move was designed to dominate attention without appearing domineering. For Harry and Meghan, every microgesture, every attempt to engage, was a test of composure. Could they respond without overstepping? Could they navigate subtle rebuff without betraying frustration or desperation? The audience, of course, was engrossed. Every camera lens captured Amal's poise. Every reporter took note of the tiny signals. Social media exploded in real-time analysis. Body language experts deconstructed Amal's eye contact. Fans and critics debated Meghan's reactions, and commentators described the scene as a silent chess match on a red carpet. Even casual viewers sensed the tension. It wasn't theatrical drama. It was psychological mastery, a masterclass in influence and perception. A particularly striking moment occurred when Meghan attempted a soft compliment toward Amal, mentioning her work on international human rights cases. Amal acknowledged it, with a faint nod and a controlled, polite smile. Nothing more. Not a word of engagement, not a hint of warmth beyond the minimal social courtesy. It was acknowledgement without inclusion. The subtlety of this action was devastating. Harry and Meghan had expected friendliness. Instead, they received measured composure that left them guessing how to proceed. And then came another layer of tension. The crowd began reacting. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession, not only capturing the elegance of the Clooneys, but also the subtle discomfort of the royals. Observers whispered, noticing the tiny cracks in composure. Every misstep, every hesitant gesture from Harry and Meghan was amplified, making the red carpet encounter feel like a high-stakes psychological game. And it was. Amal had effectively set the rules. Engagement was conditional, presence was secondary, and dominance was nonverbal but unmistakable. Harry, sensing the continued challenge, tried to shift tactics. A joke, a playful comment, a soft laugh intended to lighten the tension. But Amal, ever poised, responded only with a faint, measured smile. It was enough to acknowledge the effort without granting the space Harry sought. Meghan, following suit, adjusted her posture, attempting grace under pressure, but the subtle mastery of Amal's poise continued to define the interaction. Each move by the royal couple was met with calm authority, highlighting the skill gap in navigating this particular social arena. Here's the contradiction that made the scene unforgettable. The royals were trained for public scrutiny, accustomed to commanding attention, and masters of their own narrative. Yet, in the presence of Amal Clooney, someone whose power is entirely derived from presence, precision, and calm authority, they were outmaneuvered. No raised voices, no overt rebuffs, no drama. Just an effortless display of poise that shifted attention, dictated space, and controlled narrative. The irony was stark, the tension palpable, and the crowd could feel it. Audience question: if you were in Meghan's shoes, would you persist? Would you step back gracefully, knowing any further effort could backfire? Or would you push, risking subtle humiliation for the chance to reclaim presence? These are not hypothetical questions for the couple. They were moments of raw social calculation under the brightest lights. And just as Harry and Meghan appeared to gather composure to attempt another approach, Amal executed a subtle, almost imperceptible maneuver. A graceful step to the side, a slight adjustment of her gaze, a flick of her hand. It reasserted spatial dominance, subtly reinforcing boundaries without a word. George mirrored the motion, and the pair continued their red carpet flow with perfect coordination. The message was unmistakable. This is our stage. Recognition is extended. Inclusion is controlled. And every observer could feel the impact. But just when it seemed the royal couple might retreat, the dynamics shifted slightly. A brief exchange, a subtle gesture from George, acknowledging, but not inviting, created the tiniest opening, a glimmer of potential engagement. Meghan's eyes widened slightly, Harry straightened subtly, and the audience sensed a possible pivot. The tension was now a delicate balance. One move could reclaim presence. One misstep could deepen marginalization. A photographer, stepping forward for a key shot, unwittingly positioned the group so that Harry and Meghan could step into the frame. A fleeting opportunity. But how they would use it, and whether the Clooneys would allow it to disrupt their dominance, was entirely uncertain. The next moments would determine who commanded the narrative and who was merely playing catch-up in a subtle, high-stakes power play. What happens when a subtle power play isn't just contained to the red carpet, but explodes across the globe in real time? For Harry and Meghan, the answer came faster than they could process. While flashes captured every micro-expression and gesture, the digital world erupted almost instantaneously. Within seconds, the first clips, images, and GIFs were circulating online, dissected, captioned, and analyzed by millions. And the story wasn't just about presence or fashion. It was about dominance, perception, and public humiliation on a scale the royal couple had rarely encountered. The first signs of the social media storm were subtle. A Twitter post highlighted Amal's calm poise, captioned simply, "Absolute queen energy." Another tweeted, George Clooney just schooled Harry and Meghan without saying a word. Within minutes, these small observations snowballed into trending hashtags. Hashtag Red Carpet Showdown. Hashtag Clooney Effect. Hashtag Royal vs. Hollywood. Instagram feeds flooded with stills of the subtle but telling gestures. Amal's slight nod, George's measured smile, Meghan's tentative hand movement. Viewers began commenting on the contrasts between elegance and desperation, control and uncertainty. It wasn't just entertainment gossip. Analysts and commentators began dissecting the body language with forensic precision. Notice the spacing, one viral video pointed out. Amal subtly positions herself to control the flow of attention. George's nod is acknowledgement without engagement, a masterclass in social dominance. Even casual viewers picked up on it, understanding viscerally what the royals themselves were realizing in real time. Presence, confidence, and timing can outweigh titles, lineage, or previous fame. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan tried to recalibrate. A soft wave here, a tentative smile there, a brief verbal acknowledgement, all intended to regain footing. But the social media narrative had already framed the story. The Clooneys commanded attention, the royals were sidelined. Every attempt by Harry and Meghan to insert themselves into the interaction was met with commentary dissecting whether it was effective, awkward, or forced. Memes began to emerge almost instantly. Side-by-side comparisons of poses, exaggerated gifs of subtle gestures, and humorous takes on the perceived discomfort. The pace was overwhelming. Within minutes, YouTube clips of the encounter were uploaded, some slowed down frame by frame to highlight the subtle power plays. TikTok creators turned Amal's glances and George's nods into short, viral clips, often set to dramatic or ironic music. Facebook groups debated the encounter's implications, with opinions split between admiration for Clooney control and sympathy for the royals' vulnerability. The sheer volume of online attention transformed a fleeting red carpet moment into a global spectacle. And the irony wasn't lost. Harry and Meghan, used to shaping public narratives through interviews, documentaries, and media appearances, found themselves on the receiving end of narrative control. The red carpet, once a space of performance and calculated charm, had been captured, uploaded, dissected, and amplified in a digital echo chamber that magnified every nuance. In real time, the royals were learning a crucial lesson. Even decades of experience in public life couldn't guarantee mastery in every arena, especially one dominated by a different kind of celebrity intelligence. Audience question: imagine seeing millions of people dissect your every move in real time. How would you react? Would you retreat, attempt to correct your narrative, or double down and risk further scrutiny? For Harry and Meghan, the answer wasn't straightforward. Every gesture could be interpreted, misinterpreted, or memified. Every attempt at regaining composure risked deepening the public perception that they were outmaneuvered. The social media reaction wasn't merely commentary, it was narrative shaping. Journalists from mainstream outlets, entertainment blogs, and online tabloids quickly published analyses. Red Carpet Showdown. Clooneys outshine royals. One headline read, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle struggle to keep up with Hollywood elite, declared another. Opinion pieces dissected how Amal's poise set the tone, how George's subtle nods communicated authority, and how the royals' attempts at engagement were politely deflected. Within hours, this became more than a moment. It became a viral narrative that framed the story for the world. And yet, the online storm had its emotional undertone. Supporters of Harry and Meghan expressed outrage at what they saw as subtle humiliation. Others lauded the Clooneys' restraint and class, seeing it as a demonstration of how control and composure can command space without confrontation. The divide between admiration and sympathy created a layered discussion. It wasn't just about celebrity. It was about power, influence, and social dynamics in a highly visible setting. The tension escalated further as viral analyses began including commentary from social media experts, body language analysts, and even PR strategists. Frame-by-frame breakdowns of Amal's posture revealed tiny adjustments in stance that maintained her visual dominance. George's nods were praised as a textbook example of acknowledgement without engagement, a maneuver that preserved dignity while asserting hierarchy. Even the subtleties of Meghan's micro-expressions were analyzed, flickers of hesitation, brief signs of recalibration, and attempts at controlled engagement. Every observer could feel the tension, almost as if they were on the red carpet themselves. But the speed of social media also meant that narrative control was fleeting. Clips of the Clooneys' interactions were juxtaposed with shots of Harry and Meghan smiling, waving, or attempting conversation. Audiences debated whether the royals were merely polite or visibly uncomfortable. Memes and GIFs captured the irony of practiced poise meeting subtle dominance. Online polls asked viewers, "Who owns this red carpet? Who dominated the encounter?" And the results, overwhelmingly, favored George and Amal Clooney. The psychological impact on Harry and Meghan must have been significant. Every small gesture, every polite attempt to engage, was now under global scrutiny. The subtle rebuffs, already felt in real time on the carpet, were now magnified exponentially through the lens of digital media. Social media was no longer just commentary. It was judgment, amplification, and cultural narrative building. And for the royals, who were accustomed to controlling their image, this was both humbling and inescapable. And yet, in the midst of this digital storm, there was an opportunity. A narrow, fleeting chance to reclaim narrative control. A single photograph captured a moment where Meghan's posture was perfect, her smile authentic, and Harry's expression showed poise and engagement. The clip quickly circulated online, sparking a wave of supportive commentary. "Look at that composure. They're holding their own." But even this moment was brief, fleeting, overshadowed by the viral power of Amal's icy charm and George's measured dominance. The situation illustrates a broader truth. In the digital age, every gesture, glance, and movement is instantly amplified. Influence and perception can be as much about subtle cues as bold actions. The red carpet, once a space of fleeting attention, had become a live theater where narrative, power, and public perception collided. Every observer, every social media user, every reporter contributed to the amplification, creating a story far larger than the event itself. And just as the social media storm seemed to settle into a narrative, Clooneys dominate, royals sidelined, a new element emerged. Clips of a brief interaction, almost missed by cameras, hinted at something unexpected. A fleeting moment where Harry and Meghan almost bridged the gap. A shared smile, a synchronized gesture, a subtle nod, tiny in duration but immense in potential. The crowd online caught it, sparking speculation. Could the royal couple find a way to reclaim presence in this high-stakes social arena? But before anyone could fully interpret this fleeting moment, Amal's subtle shift reasserted dominance. George's measured steps, the timing of his smile, and Amal's controlled gaze reminded everyone. The narrative remained theirs to control. The online world, still buzzing, watched intently, the story evolving in real time. Every second, every clip, every frame became part of a viral saga that would define the encounter for years to come. The next moment on the red carpet promised to either cement the Clooneys' dominance or give Harry and Meghan a chance at redemption. And no one, not the crowd, not the cameras, not social media, could predict which way it would go. What happens when controlled elegance meets chaotic media energy? For Harry and Meghan, the answer became painfully clear as the paparazzi frenzy intensified. The cameras didn't just capture images. They hunted, probing every movement, every expression, and every microgesture. Flashbulbs exploded in unrelenting staccato. Microphones jostled for attention, and the sheer weight of scrutiny created a pressure cooker atmosphere that few could withstand. This was no longer merely a red carpet. It was a battlefield of perception, and every frame mattered. George and Amal Clooney, masters of presence, navigated the chaos with the fluidity of dancers. Each step was deliberate, each glance calculated. George's arm subtly guided Amal's flow, not to dominate, but to maintain equilibrium in a storm of flashes and lens clicks. Amal's posture was flawless, her head held high, and every move projected calm authority. The paparazzi, sensing the pair's control, surged forward for photos, yet the Clooneys remained the orchestrators of the moment. They commanded attention without aggression, and in doing so, they maintained dominance over both the media and Harry and Meghan. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan faced a new challenge. The frenetic energy of photographers who were no longer content to capture elegance, but now sought drama. Every attempt the royals made to engage, to smile, or to position themselves strategically was interrupted by a lens pushing too close, a shout of a name, or an accidental obstruction. The chaotic nature of paparazzi behavior turned even small gestures into potential public missteps. And in contrast, the Clooneys' composure made the royals' calculated movements appear increasingly awkward. Imagine standing there, poised, rehearsed, and prepared for scrutiny, only to have the environment itself resist your control. Every camera click magnified pressure. Every voice demanded attention. Every angle exposed even the smallest hesitation. For Harry and Meghan, who had long navigated the disciplined protocols of royal engagements, this kind of unstructured media storm was foreign, unpredictable, and relentless. Every micro-movement risked interpretation, judgment, and amplification on a global scale. George and Amal, however, treated the chaos as an extension of their skill. Amal's eyes scanned the crowd continuously, capturing potential obstacles before they became problems. Her hand movements were minimal yet precise, subtly guiding photographers' attention. George, always attuned to timing and space, shifted slightly to maintain visual harmony and control narrative angles. The pair's synchronization created a visual dominance that was hypnotic. Observers, consciously or unconsciously, followed their lead. The cameras, instead of dictating the scene, became instruments of the Clooneys' authority. Harry and Meghan, attempting to reclaim some semblance of equilibrium, tried subtle interventions. A polite nod here, a soft smile there, a brief engagement with a journalist, small, carefully calculated moves designed to assert relevance without appearing pushy. But each attempt was met with amplified scrutiny. The cameras, hungry for reaction, zoomed in on every flicker of uncertainty. Social media instantly latched onto these moments, framing them as hesitation, awkwardness, or subtle defeat. The frenetic pace of media attention became almost a living entity, feeding on every motion, amplifying every uncertainty, and creating a narrative that increasingly favored the Clooneys. Audience question: if you were Harry or Meghan, would you try to fight for narrative control amidst this chaos? Would you pause and recalculate, or would you risk further exposure by pushing forward? The stakes were immense. Every move had consequences, and the public eye was unforgiving. In this environment, even seasoned public figures could falter. The paparazzi frenzy reached a new peak when a cluster of photographers, eager for the perfect shot, inadvertently created a visual bottleneck. Harry and Meghan found themselves slightly out of frame, partially obscured by camera rigs and journalists leaning forward. The Clooneys, in contrast, emerged from the chaos with perfect positioning, unimpeded and in full view. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Chaos elevated some, undermined others. Presence, composure, and subtle spatial mastery determined who dominated the narrative. And then came a twist that amplified the tension. A photographer, misjudging the flow, called out directly to Harry and Meghan, hoping for a candid reaction. The sudden demand forced the royals into immediate recalibration, a split-second adjustment that revealed visible tension. George and Amal, unshaken, continued their elegant progression, subtly signaling to onlookers and the press that they controlled not only attention but space itself. The red carpet was no longer just a stage. It had become a live lesson in social hierarchy and power dynamics. The irony was exquisite. Harry and Meghan, accustomed to meticulously orchestrating their public image, were now at the mercy of both the environment and their own attempts at intervention. Every camera angle, every lens click, every shout from the press amplified the precariousness of their position. Social media users dissected the moments instantly. Memes captured the obscured positioning. GIFs highlighted subtle gestures of awkwardness, and commentary suggested that the royals were losing control of the narrative in real time. The world had become a magnifying glass, turning minor miscalculations into viral fodder. Yet, even amidst the frenzy, Harry and Meghan sought to reclaim influence. A soft wave, a careful smile, a subtle adjustment in posture, small, precise attempts to regain footing. But the Clooneys' presence rendered these efforts comparatively minor. George's minimal gestures and Amal's poised acknowledgement communicated authority without even needing direct confrontation. Every observer could feel the imbalance. The narrative was no longer just about appearances. It had become a psychological battle of influence, control, and perception. The pressure escalated further as the frenzy intensified with video crews capturing live reactions. Each motion, however brief, was instantly broadcast to the world. Commentary on late-night shows, entertainment news, and online blogs dissected body language, facial expressions, and the unfolding microdynamics of the encounter. Every microgesture was analyzed. Amal's slight step, George's subtle nod, Meghan's hesitant lean, Harry's fleeting glance. The paparazzi frenzy didn't just amplify tension, it transformed subtle power plays into global spectacle. Then